Welcome to another YouTube production of Wooden Pulpit Media about the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. This time part 5, the massacre spreads. We had talked about the massacre at Paris that began on August 24th, early in the morning. But the massacres did not stay confined to Paris. No, they spread all throughout France. The message had gone out to kill and murder the Huguenots, wherever they may be. Most sources agree on 12 major massacres that see hundreds of deaths. Some will include a few other cities as a major massacre, but 12 seems to be at the least number of cities that followed through with rounding up Huguenots in an organized style and slaughtering them. It really begins that evening of August 24th. It appears that Catherine, who was Countess of Meaux, or Meaux, however you say it, had prepared a letter and sent it out as the massacre began, and it reached the city by Sunday evening to round up the Huguenots, arrest them, those people who believed in the Reformed faith, put them in jail, and then kill them. And so they did. It did turn out that this city is divided, with at least a little portion being on the other side of the river Marne. That was referred to as the Grand Marche, where 400 Huguenot houses were. Those people were able to see that on the other side of the river, the Huguenots, their brothers in Christ, were being rounded up and slaughtered and killed, and they fled, except for 25 women who were caught. Those 400 houses were plundered. The people chased, but they escaped into the forest, or they escaped into the next towns, and people gave up the pursuit. One of those 25 women who was being dragged after being beaten to a Catholic church to be force-fed the Mass, insulted the Mass so much with her words that they just killed her right there. Those other Huguenots who had been rounded up, who lived on the wrong side of the Marne, were slaughtered the next day on Monday. The murderers took a break in order to have a feast, still covered in the blood of the Reformed faith, before continuing to slaughter those Huguenots. On August 26, we see in the area of Anjou, where Henry was duke, that he sent letters to the governor of Saumur to kill all the Huguenots. And on that letter it said, after you finish in Saumur, go to Angers and Angers and do the same thing. And so he did. By August 30th, in the city of Troyes, the gates were closed on the 26th to prevent anyone from escaping. Huguenots were rounded up and put in prison, but not immediately slaughtered, as there appears to be perhaps some doubt that this was really the king's will, until finally a man comes from Paris with a proclamation in his hand that says, signed by King Charles IX, stop murdering the Huguenots. However, they do not. No, they do not. Because what was written on paper was often just to cover up publicly. And the message was, kill them all and then publish this. And so on the 3rd, he finds the Huguenots are still in jail. On 4th, they spend the day slaughtering the Huguenots. On the 5th, they publish the letter to the town that no more Huguenots are to be killed. On the next day, in the city of Lyon, many Huguenots were dragged from their houses and murdered, but it was a city that was a boiling pot. The murder was not yet done in large open-air gangs, but rather just a few. It was not the official job of persecution and murder. It was just some who had taken the opportunity to do so. Many of those Huguenots would actually come to the city officials and say, please put me in jail. I'm safer there than I am in the houses, not knowing what had happened in the other towns. And on the 30th, they are all finally gathered together, told to present themselves and put in jail. And they are numbered and their houses looted. There were too many people all to fit in the jail. There were 300 people that had to be placed in the Archbishop's palace, and 2 monasteries also were filled with more. And the next day, the army came around and gave people a choice. Will you become Roman Catholic or you will die? Only about 30 chose to go the Roman Catholic route. It spills over into September in the city of Orleans, where there is a general massacre that begins on the 1st, where the leaders of the Huguenots are singled out and killed, and spills over into the night and into September 2nd, where a general massacre goes out through all the city. 1,200 men were killed, 150 women were killed, and their children, we know not the number. This was published loudly and proudly by the city of Orleans. The city of Bourges, or however it is pronounced, was a similar fate awaited the Huguenots. Although news that slaughters were taking place in Paris arrived before the orders in this particular place, it allowed some Huguenots to escape the city, including one who would go on to write much that has helped America even about the freedom of religion and the right of law above even the king. Legal professor at that time, Huguenot Francis Altman, who would be able to escape the city because he heard the news and worried that it meant the extermination of his people, and he fled. But by September 2nd, all the remaining Huguenots who had not followed that example were arrested, put in prison, where they were easily slaughtered. By September 17th, we're almost a month from the massacres now, and they're still occurring, where finally it breaks out in the city of Rouen. The leader there had tried to stop it. He didn't want such a murder to take place, but he eventually realized he was not going to be able to stop it, so he leaves. He arranges to make sure that he's out. And while that definitely saved the lives of many Huguenots, especially those who were richer and able to flee, and many fled actually to England. There's 50 names one day of people who were Huguenots arriving, claiming that they were about to die. In England, those who were not able to do so suffered the violence and the death that came with the massacre. We happen to know numbers that the church, the Huguenot Reformed Church in Rouen, had 16,500 people prior to the massacre. Afterwards, numbers differ, but no more than 3,000 were left. And the massacres continued. And they followed a very similar pattern, gathering them into jails, into prisons, and then putting them to death. 200 to 300 at Toulouse, 264 at Bordeaux. The names were listed and published by the council or the parliament, the city council or the city parliament of Bordeaux. And it wasn't just those massacre sites. We know that there were many other cities that had smaller numbers that don't quite have a high enough death toll to reach massacre level. Maybe because the city was too small. Maybe sometimes because there weren't enough Huguenots in town. But we do know that refugees fled from everywhere they could, saying that every town had erected a gallows, and from it were hanging the Huguenots. They fled over the border to Geneva. They fled to the cities that were fortified and therefore had no Roman Catholic presence to slaughter the Huguenots, like La Rochelle, which was sort of the unofficial capital of the Reformed Huguenot world in France. There were 50 pastors who had fled their cities because everyone was being murdered. There are accounts of other cities where there were 70 put to death, where there were 80 put to death. Who knows how many more towns had gone through such killing. This is a sad and disturbing incident in the history of the church. We hope that you'll reflect on such things, and may the Lord never let such thing happen again. But it is often His will, for the world hates His church. Thank you for watching a Wooden Pulpit production.